Cowboy Bebop is no doubt one of the most acclaimed anime series of all time. Even though it had a short run of just 26 episodes, this was enough for people to hold the series in high regard, with many praising both the technical aspects of the show, such as its animation, as well as its story and themes. With such a well-known series, it's no surprise that there are many people sharing their opinions and analysis online, but I'm surprised to find that there's very little analysis on one of the most important aspects of the show, its music. I mean, there have been videos about Yoko Kanno's amazing soundtrack, and while these videos are extremely good, they tend to focus more on the technical aspect of the music, but nobody really talks about the music in the context of the story. Why was jazz such a perfect choice to score the show, and how did it further develop the story and themes being explored? How is the essence of jazz connected to the philosophy of Cowboy Bebop? This is really what I want to explore today, but first, we need to talk about jazz. Jazz is a music genre which originated in the late 19th and early 20th century. It arose in New Orleans at this time, but quickly spread across the United States, evolving as it did so. Jazz was unique since it was a blend of both African American and European American music, taking traditional African rhythms and African American genres like blues, and combining it with traditional European instruments and chords. Due to this unique blend of different cultures, which really could only happen in the United States, jazz is considered America's greatest musical genre, and I think it is these aspects of jazz which make it such a good fit to score Cowboy Bebop. The composer of Cowboy Bebop, Yoko Kanno, is no stranger to the blending of different styles of music. During university, she took a trip to the United States to better understand how different cultures would play music differently. She said that this trip was inspired by an urge to play music which was more bold and, in her words, cool, an urge she has had since middle school. In college, she would often transcribe jazz and funk music, which led to her interest in the genre, and she questioned how these musicians were able to create such a unique rhythm. She traveled to the US to watch these groups firsthand, taking a Greyhound bus from the west to the east. She found that depending on the location, there would be differences in how the music was played, even if it all fell under the same genre umbrella. For example, the further east she went, the more swing she would notice in the rhythm. She claimed that the beat of the song was like a language in and of itself, a claim which would be bolstered by later visits abroad to other places like Brazil, where she said genres like samba and bossa nova were yet another language. After witnessing how these genres were played by other cultures, she would try and blend them to create her own unique style, a truly cross-cultural product. And this emphasis on learning from other cultures is fitting, because it's perfect for today's sponsor, Boxu. If you're here watching this video about Cowboy Bebop and anime, chances are that you're probably at least interested in Japanese culture. If this is the case, you would most definitely be interested in Boxu. Boxu is a premium Japanese snack box subscription service that delivers monthly themed box filled with original assortments of Japanese snacks. They partner with established family snack makers to provide treats which provide a truly authentic Japanese experience. Here I am with my own box gratuitously provided by Boxu. This month's theme is Sakura season, in celebration of the cherry blossoms. Right away, the first thing you notice is how high quality this box is. This wonderful pink color with these flower prints just ooze professionalism and love. Like, for most shipments, you would just throw out the box immediately, but here I want to keep the boxes I get each month and collect them because they're just so well made. Opening it up, we're greeted with this culture guide, which is a handy manual explaining the theme of the month as well as all the food found within. Not only does it just describe the food, it also provides details on the makers, flavors, and any dietary restrictions, all packaged within this very aesthetically pleasing book. And now onto the food itself. There's a wide variety of snacks of all different textures and flavors for whatever snacking mood you're in. There was enough in here to comfortably share amongst me and 5 of my friends. To be honest, we're kinda skeptical about some of the snacks because we've never really tried anything like them before, but after we ate, we unanimously agreed that it was all delicious. It would take a long time for me to go into everything, but I will say that my personal favorite was the Kanagawa Sakura jelly. This jelly with actual sakura blossoms inside of it immediately stood out to me. Visually, it was very striking and even better to taste. I really enjoy Boxu because it gave me the chance to try a variety of authentic Japanese snacks which otherwise I probably wouldn't have a chance to try. And I want to share that experience with you guys. If you want to try out Boxu for yourself, use my code RIVECHA10 and this link to get 10% off your own authentic Japanese subscription from Boxu. That's code RIVECHA10. By the time this video goes up on the 25th of March, there will only be 6 days left to get the Sakura Season box. As long as you subscribe to Boxu by the end of March, you will receive the Sakura Season as your first box. But if you're watching this later, or if you decide to subscribe to Boxu later, no worries. Boxu will have another amazing themed box ready for you. Seriously guys, I cannot reiterate enough how cool Boxu is, and you do not want to miss out. Thank you Boxu for the sponsorship, and now let's get back to jamming. While composing for Bebop, Kano ensured that the score would feel less like just simple background music and more like a dynamic extension of the events and settings occurring on screen. The music tells the story itself alongside the visuals and dialogue, which is a necessary component for a good soundtrack. However, the decision to use different subgenres of jazz for the show is one which was, in my opinion, perfect for Bebop. Series director Shinichiro Watanabe described the show as a new genre upon itself, combining space opera, noir, westerns, cyberpunk, and comedy. The show's episodic nature would have it emphasize certain genres in certain episodes, so some episodes would be a comedic western, while others were a melancholic noir. To score such a variety of genres, themes, and emotions, there really isn't a better type of music out there like jazz, with its many subgenres giving a great range to complement the show. The use of jazz in this type of media wasn't unheard of at the time. For example, the cyberpunk film Blade Runner, one of the biggest inspirations for Bebop, contains a mix of both synth and smooth jazz music. This makes sense as the cyberpunk genre is a combination of sci-fi, giving us the synth, and the noir detective genre, which would use smooth jazz in its films. These two genres meld together well to give us the melancholic and sensual soundtrack to Blade Runner. However, as we said before, Cowboy Bebop has a variety of moods across its episodes, much more diverse than Blade Runner's fairly consistent melancholy. Sure, there are melancholic moments where this sensual jazz fits, but there are other episodes which are much more lighthearted and upbeat, where genres like funk, samba, or big band better convey what's happening on screen. Jazz is also a good fit for the setting of the show. We talked about how jazz was a product of the music of different cultures merging. When director Watanabe was conceptualizing the setting of the show, he wanted to ensure that multiple cultures and ethnicities were present, trying to avoid the trap of depicting a stateless society many other space fiction fall into. The same diversity of people and cultures in the real world appear in the show. While sometimes the representation is a bit off, such as languages not being spoken well by the voice actors, this really helps in making the setting of Cowboy Bebop feel truly alive, and personally, it's one of the standout parts of the show's setting to me. Even to this day, anime typically has a problem with how they depict certain groups of people, so seeing Cowboy Bebop perform well in that aspect, especially for a show that aired over 20 years ago, is refreshing. Also, Cowboy Bebop features settings all across the solar system, and each of them had their own unique characteristics, both physically as well as with the societies of people living there. With such unique settings and blends of culture, it's no wonder jazz was chosen to score the show. Another reason why I think jazz works so well with Cowboy Bebop is how American the show is. I mean, we've already talked about how the series depicts a melting pot of different cultures, a term used to describe the United States for a while now. It's kind of ironic since Watanabe has said that the American-centric worldview repulses him. However, his love for classic American film has definitely influenced the show, as many episodes often reference different genres of American movies. The biggest American influence on the show can be found in the title itself. Yep, in Cowboy Bebop. Cowboy. The cowboy is the quintessential American hero. The myth of the ideal cowboy has been a part of American culture for over a century at this point. As opposed to other traditional heroes, who typically are noble warriors, the cowboy is seen as mostly an outcast of society, which is why he is found in the Wild West, at the fringes of civilization. He is the ultimate realization of American individualism, someone who is not loyal to anybody or anything but himself. However, despite taking the lonesome path, this hero is still motivated to do what is morally right, even if it means using socially frowned upon methods. While the actual cowboy genre has died down, the idea of the cowboy has lived on in other American media, such as the detective in noir film. In Cowboy Bebop, this character is, of course, our main character, the bounty hunter Spike. Conveniently, in the show, bounty hunters are also known by another name, cowboys. Spike as a character fits the cowboy archetype quite well. He's a pretty loner character with a mysterious past. Even his partner, Jet, finds Spike to be an enigma sometimes. Don't let his nonchalant demeanor fool you, though. He's a deadly fighter, gunman, and pilot. He travels the wild final frontier of space on his mighty steed. He's a gunman with the fastest draw on Mars. However, he is still a good person at heart, using those skills to take down criminals while still staying sympathetic to their circumstances. Each episode, he rolls into town, or more specifically, rolls into a planet, helps to round up some outlaws, and then rides off into the sunset. Spike definitely fits as a quintessential American cowboy, making Bebop even more of an American show. So given the setting and characters of the show, a jazz score really is the perfect setting. But so far, we've only talked about why jazz is a good fit for the setting of the show. However, the more important part is how jazz portrays the main overarching themes of the show. One of the most unique aspects of jazz is how freeform it is compared to other forms of music. Just the compositions themselves are incredibly flexible in how you can play them. As the legendary musician Ornette Coleman said, jazz is the only music in which the same note can be played night after night, but differently each time. And if you've ever listened to any of his pieces, you can see that he definitely practices what he preaches. His albums are freeform and innovative, and they completely break the genre of jazz down to its essential, natural yet spontaneous. This aspect of jazz is at its height in the form of improvisation. In jazz, improvisation is defined as the art of spontaneously creating fresh melodies over the continuously repeating cycle of chord changes. If you've played jazz, you would know that this isn't just playing random notes and hoping for the best. You have to keep in mind the chord and chord changes, as well as the tempo and where in the song the rest of the band is. Keeping all this into account, you have to create a melody which sounds good and fits within the song. Of course, while many musicians pre-make a solo which they practice repeatedly, it still requires great skill, and there still is variation in each time they solo. But if you're playing it by ear, improvisation is quite literally composing music on the spot. Improv is the highlight of jazz, and as Ken Burns said, the genius of our country is improvisation, and jazz reflects that. It's a great contribution to the arts. Cowboy Bebop's themes are ultimately quite interesting to analyze. The structure of the show is episodic, meaning that each episode of the show is its own self-contained story. More specifically, each episode is centered on a character who, for the most part, only appears in that episode. Our main characters are only involved in the plot through circumstance, and are only really observing these life-changing events for other people. For Spike, the status quo never fundamentally changes for most of the series. Only 3 new characters join the team out of the dozens we see across the course of the episodes. He has no anchors, no plans, only going where the next bounty takes him, not dissimilar to musicians searching for gigs. He goes through life as if it were a haze, mostly uncaring and aloof about his circumstances. This philosophy of Spike's is actually shown through his fighting style. Based off Bruce Lee's Way of the Intercepting Fist, this style, inspired by Taoism, encourages spontaneity as opposed to other martial arts which encourage more rigid movements. He puts on this uncaring facade as a means to cope with and escape from trauma in his past. However, he can't run forever, and eventually when his past catches up to him, he's confronted with existential questions about the meaning of his life. Through all these years of wandering, what did he find? The truth is, life is not a destination, but instead a journey. The fog of the everyday experience and the spontaneity of random events is what most go through every day. It is the sum of these two parts which make up the meaning of life. Many people try to define life as their accomplishments, and especially nowadays, many people are pressured by society into believing that we should spend all our time working towards goals. However, life should be an appreciation of the smaller, spontaneous moments, the improvised rather than the planned. Spike's journey throughout Cowboy Bebop perfectly reflects this. The events in each episode are relatively the same, it's just his version of doing his job. But the individual people he meets and what he goes through with them are all unique learning experiences for him. It's as if life is playing the same note night after night, but differently each time. If these themes sound familiar, it might have come from a more recent film, Soul. This Pixar film also has themes of appreciating life through the spontaneous moments found within everyday mundanity. And of course, this movie also has jazz as a major part of its plot and themes. These stories provide an important lesson that all of us should take to heart. Appreciate life in all of its small moments. Don't feel pressure to continuously work towards expectations. Don't let accomplishments define your self-worth and happiness. Instead, enjoy life as you experience it. Find the joy within our mundane routines. Ultimately, the insignificance of our experience shouldn't be a reason to feel depressed about our lives. Rather, it should be a reason to appreciate our time with the people we come across and things we get to experience in the frontier of our life. Because in the end,
oh well, whatever happens, happens.